My name is Savannah Maddox. I'm 35, and last Thursday morning, I opened my bank app on autopilot just like I've done every Friday for the last 10 years to check in on the nest egg I built from scratch. Only this time, the screen didn't show $5 million. It showed zero. No error message. No maintenance warning. Just a clean, empty balance where my future used to live. Have you ever felt your stomach drop before your brain could catch up? Yeah. That. Leave a comment if you've ever trusted the wrong person with just a little too much. Because what I found out next didn't just break my trust. It rewrote everything I thought I knew about family, money, and control. Let me take you back a few days because this didn't start with the missing money. It started with something small. A notification. I stared at the screen, blinking so hard I thought I was having a stroke. I closed the app. Reopened it. Still zero. My hand went cold against the kitchen counter as I reached for the mug I hadn't touched. Half coffee, half cream, all forgotten now. I tried refreshing again. I checked the date. I checked the connection. I checked everything but the thing I didn't want to believe. It was gone. $5 million. My life's work. My plan. My backup. My power. Gone. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, trying to breathe through the buzz in my ears. The house was quiet, just the hum of the fridge and the faint sound of lawnmowers down the block. I lived in a quiet neighborhood just east of downtown Knoxville. A place that felt secure, predictable. So how the hell had this happened? I pulled out my laptop. Not my work one, the personal one I'd had for years. The one I only used for financial planning, tax documents, mortgage pre-approvals, and a few dusty family photos. It booted up slower than usual. Maybe my software glitched. Maybe the bank had flagged something and temporarily locked my account. I knew better, but I was still bargaining with reality. I opened my spreadsheet, my vault. The document I updated every Sunday without fail. Savannah, account, projection. XLSX. Color-coded, backed up 3 ways. My quiet obsession. The numbers were still there. My savings trajectory. My milestones. Everything up to date as of 5 days ago. Everything I'd worked for, right there, like a taunt. But when I opened the banking app again, reality didn't budge. Zero. No pending deposits. No flags. No. You've exceeded your transfer limit. Just a completed wire transfer for the full amount, sent the night before. To an unfamiliar account ending in 8273. My stomach twisted. There were no alerts. No approvals. Not even a 2-factor ping. Unless someone had access to my backup codes. Or had been watching me. My phone buzzed then, almost like it was listening. An old notification from 2 days ago I'd swiped away without thinking. New device signed in. Savannah_M_Addy@protonmail.com. I didn't remember that login. I never used that email for anything except the day I registered it for added encryption. For banking-related backups. My breath caught. The thought came so fast and so loud I almost said it out loud. Number she wouldn't. But the image hit anyway, clear as day. Denise. Sitting at my kitchen counter 2 months ago. Bright red lipstick. AirPods in. Holding my laptop. You've got so many tabs open, she'd said with that sugary chuckle. Let me optimize it for you, on. I do this for my coaching clients all the time. I'd been exhausted. Distracted. Grateful, even. I let her. God help me, I let her. Now, I felt the kind of panic that comes from knowing you can't undo something. Not with an apology. Not with a reset. I opened my system settings. Checked the background processes. And there it was, something called private bridge.exe. I didn't remember installing it. It didn't belong to any app I used. I right-clicked. Hit scan with malware hunter. It lit up red. Keylogger. Screenshot recorder. Remote access. Spyware. My hand flew to my mouth before the sound could escape. The horror wasn't just that someone had watched me. It was that someone had known me. Intimately. Closely. Enough to mimic my language, guess my passwords, navigate my files without raising suspicion. I looked back at the banking screen. The recipient's name wasn't visible. Just the routing information and the note. Internal transfer approved. Approved by who? Not me. I opened my text messages, scrolling through old threads with Denise. There were a few from months ago asking if I'd decided on a property yet. Whether I'd locked in a good mortgage rate. Casual. Too casual, in hindsight. The sick part was she probably thought I'd never find out. That I'd blame the bank. Blame myself, blame anyone but her. And, for a second, I almost did. Because who wants to believe that the woman who hosted your 35th birthday brunch, who said your mother would be proud, would sit in your home and steal your life out from under you? I reached for my phone and called the fraud department at my bank. While I waited on hold, I opened up my files. Every spreadsheet, every PDF, every mortgage doc. It was all still there. Which somehow made it worse. I wasn't hacked by a stranger. I was hunted by someone I trusted. The rep came on the line, cheerful and clueless, asking how she could help me today. I had to clear my throat before I could answer. My balance was wiped last night. I said, voice steady despite the pressure building behind my ribs. There was an unauthorized wire transfer, and I need to freeze everything. Right now. Certainly, she replied, chipper. Let me just verify a few things. As I read off my security questions, one thought kept circling. Denise didn't break in. She was let in. By me. And somehow, that was the worst part of all. The hold music was still playing, low and cheery, as I stared at the banking screen. I couldn't hear it anymore. I was already somewhere else. Back in that cold, echoing church in Johnson City. My mother's funeral. The white lilies were already starting to brown at the edges, and I was gripping my father's hand so tightly I thought I'd break it. That was the first day I saw Denise Arnett. She arrived late, flanked by a man I didn't recognize and wearing sunglasses indoors. She hugged everyone she could reach, even people who flinched. Said things like, God needed her more than we did. I was 23 and had just buried the woman who raised me. Denise left that funeral with my father's attention, and never gave it back. She moved into our house less than 8 months later. He said it was for companionship. She makes me laugh, he told me over a diner lunch I didn't ask for. You're too serious, Savannah, you always have been. I did. It wasn't that I hated her, I didn't. It's that she watched me the way someone watches a chessboard. I remember coming home from college one weekend and finding my mother's framed wedding photo gone from the living room. In its place, a glossy canvas print of a sunflower field and the words "Choose Joy." I asked where the photo went. Denise smiled and said, "Oh honey, that energy was just too heavy for the space." That energy. She did that with everything: my mother's clothes, her old recipe cards, the cedar chest we used to keep in the hallway. All disappeared quietly, folded into the house like she'd been there forever. And my father let her. The first time she asked about my finances, I was 25. She was flipping through a magazine on our back porch, sipping lemon water like it was a performance. She didn't even look up when she said it. So, you ever think about sharing some of that bank job salary with your daddy? Maybe help with some of the house expenses? I didn't respond. I just took a sip of my own drink and stared at the yard, the way the kudzu curled around the chain-link fence. She waited exactly 4 seconds before adding, "He raised you all by himself after your mom died, you know." It was a strange thing to hear because my mother died when I was 23. But Denise had already rewritten that part. She did that a lot. And every time I tried to bring it up with my dad, he'd shake his head and say I was imagining things. That I was being dramatic. Denise means well, don't be ungrateful. Ungrateful. That word sat in my chest now like lead. The bank rep came back on the line just as I was closing out my memories. "Yes ma'am, we've locked your account and initiated a hold on outgoing transfers. I've also escalated this to our fraud team. Someone will reach out within 24 hours. Oh. I thanked her. Hung up. Set the phone down with a soft click. Then I opened my emails. I typed Denise's name into the search bar. 97 messages. The most recent was from 2 weeks ago, a link to some YouTube video about abundance mindset and energetic wealth clearing. I clicked it. The host wore a silk turban and promised viewers that their money woes were rooted in ancestral karma. I closed the tab. Scrolled back further. Emails asking if I needed help finding a less risky property, suggesting that maybe renting longer would help me stay more fluid in the universe. And one from last fall that stood out, bold and untouched. Joint Investment Opportunity Family First Fund. I'd never opened it. Until now. Inside was a PDF proposal for a real estate development scheme in Atlanta. No return history. No business registration. But right at the top, her name, Denise Arnett Maddox, founding director. And at the bottom, in soft script font, Savannah, just think how powerful this could be for our family. All love, always. I pushed back from the desk and stood. I needed air. The screen felt like it was burning through me. Not because of the money though, yes, that hurt, but because it wasn't a one-time betrayal. It was the long game. She'd been circling my finances for years, calling it care, calling it connection. And I'd let it happen. Because I didn't want to fight. Because my father looked happier with her than he had in years. Because the cost of pushing back always seemed just a little too high. I looked at the framed photo above my bookshelf, my mother holding me as a baby on our porch swing. I hadn't thought about that swing in ages. Denise had it taken down the summer after she moved in. Said it was rotting and full of termites. But I'd sat on that swing every night the summer before Mom passed. Wrapped in a blanket, thinking about where my life was headed. It was the last place I ever felt safe in that house. Now, it was a flower bed. I sat back down and took a deep breath. My hands were shaking. I wasn't sure what I was more furious about. That Denise had stolen from me. Or that I'd ignored the signs until it was too late. And something told me this wasn't even the worst of it yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a minute. I just sat there, in my hoodie and slippers, staring at the laptop screen like it was breathing. I ran every scan I knew. Malware, network access logs, browser history. I pulled up my firewall settings, started tracking unusual IP addresses, writing down everything that didn't look familiar. By 3 a.m., I had 3 pages of suspicious logins. 1 from her town in Georgia, 2 from Tennessee, 1 from a device registered to an Arnett Maddox Coaching LLC. She hadn't even bothered to hide her business name. That felt like the worst part, though confident she was that I wouldn't notice. Or maybe that I wouldn't fight back. I opened a new folder and labeled it Evidence, Denise. It felt disgusting. Like filing a restraining order on a family member before you've even had a real conversation. But this wasn't just family. This was premeditated. I checked the date the spyware program had been installed. It lined up with a weekend 2 months ago when Denise was visiting Knoxville for a women's empowerment brunch. She'd stayed with us for one night because the Airbnb she booked had water damage, at least that was her excuse. I remember the smell of her perfume in our guest bathroom, the loud way she laughed at her own jokes, how she'd insisted on cooking us breakfast even though I begged her not to touch anything in my kitchen. That Sunday morning, I'd woken up late. And she was already on my laptop. I can still hear her voice. Don't worry, I'm just closing your tabs. You had like 30 open. I swear, it's giving me anxiety. And then, so casually, I ran a little optimization tool. Makes things run faster. You'll thank me. At the time, I did thank her. Now I know what she really installed. The program had a root access protocol, meaning it could log every keystroke, take random screenshots, even record through my webcam. I covered the camera with a sticky note. Too little, too late. It felt like my home had been broken into, only nothing was taken. Until now. I clicked open my browser history. She had watched everything. Not just banking. Not just spreadsheets. Emails to Mateo about our future. Conversations with mortgage lenders. Photos of properties I'd saved in my favorites folder. Even that stupid document I kept called Dream House Budget V2. She saw it all. I closed the laptop, took a breath, and then picked up my phone. Mateo answered on the second ring, voice groggy. Savannah, what's wrong? Sorry, I know it's late. I expected him to sound annoyed, or confused, or at least cautious. But all he said was, talk to me. I told him everything. Not just the account, the spyware, the screenshots, Denise's visit, the emails, the pattern. There was silence on the line for a second. Then he said, come over. He lived 10 minutes away. The roads were quiet. I pulled up to his place just as the sun was starting to tint the sky gray. Mateo opened the door in sweats, handed me a warm mug, and sat next to me on the couch while I pulled out my notebook and laid everything out. He didn't interrupt. Not once. When I was done, I felt hollow. Like I'd spoken the last words of some confession I didn't want to be true. He nodded slowly, then reached for his phone. You need someone who can look at this professionally. Someone who can confirm what she installed and when. I can do most of that myself, I said, but my voice cracked halfway through. Sure, he said gently. But you shouldn't have to. That got me. Because I realized in that moment I'd spent so much of my life doing everything myself. Fixing things before anyone could see they were broken. Getting ahead of the damage. Being prepared. And now, even with someone sitting beside me, I still felt alone. Not because Mateo wasn't helping, but because this wasn't just about the money. It was about being watched. It was about control. And I'd known that feeling long before the spyware. I took a slow sip of the tea. It wasn't sweet enough, but I didn't ask him to fix it. Instead, I looked down at my hands still shaking a little and whispered, she knew what she was doing. This wasn't a mistake. Mateo leaned back and nodded. Number it wasn't. I reached into my bag and pulled out the briefcase I always kept zipped shut. Inside were years of savings plans. Printed spreadsheets, handwritten logs from the early days when I worked the bank counter and made less than 30 grand a year. One of the papers had a little sticky note still attached. My mom's handwriting. Just one sentence. You build slow so it can last. I hadn't read that in years. I ran my fingers over the paper. Denise didn't just take money. She took what that money represented. And I was done pretending otherwise. I need to know everything she saw, I said. And when? I need a full timeline. Mateo nodded. We'll get it. I looked at him. No, not we. I would get it. Because this wasn't just theft. It was war. And Denise started it the moment she touched my laptop. I always thought I was careful. Not paranoid. Just disciplined. Two-factor authentication, separate devices, complex passwords I never repeated. I even had one of those old-school password books tucked in a safe just in case. But that morning, standing over Mateo's kitchen island, holding a printout of my own account history, I felt exposed in a way I hadn't since I was a child. The transfer had gone through at 3:12 a.m. 3 separate confirmation steps, no alerts. No phone ping. Nothing. And the wire instructions? Used my primary routing code, account suffix, and internal authorization string. That last one was the part that stopped me cold. Because I never saved that number digitally. Never spoke it aloud. It was written in blue ink on the back of an old bank seminar folder and folded into my locked briefcase at home. I hadn't looked at it in years. The only way she could have known that number was if she had watched me type it. Or if she'd taken a picture while I had the folder open. I could barely breathe. Mateo watched me from across the room, waiting. Not pressuring, just letting me process. She knew the backup code, I said slowly. He nodded. The one you never stored anywhere? I kept it offline on purpose. It's not connected to any device. She had to have seen it during a screen capture. Or when she was physically near it. I sank down onto the edge of the couch, gripping the printout in both hands. This wasn't speculation anymore. This was access. This was deliberate. This was a woman who smiled across dinner tables and hugged me with one arm while downloading my future with the other. I stared down at the paper, then at my hands. They looked like my mother's hands. I used to think that was comforting. Now I wasn't sure I wanted to see any part of myself at all. Mateo sat beside me, his voice soft. Do you remember the last time she was near the briefcase? I closed my eyes, trying to rewind. Denise had visited 3 times in the past year. One long weekend in October. One random overnight in December. And that brunch trip, just 2 months ago. That last visit, she'd borrowed my car. Said she had to grab a charger from Walgreens. But the briefcase had been in the back seat. I remembered moving it afterward, annoyed it had tipped over. The zipper was half open. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. Now, I felt sick. My mind reeled back further. 1 year after my dad remarried, I got a text from Denise asking if I wanted help setting up a Roth IRA. I'd laughed. Then I told her I had it handled. I didn't realize she wasn't joking. I looked at Mateo. I don't think she just watched me, I said. I think she planned this. For a long time. His eyes darkened. You think this has been building? She's been circling me for years, I said. Every question. Every suggestion. Every weird comment about money and family and opportunity. She was profiling me. The words sounded foreign in my own mouth, but they were true. I stood and paced the room, each step hitting harder than the last. She asked about my down payment last spring. She called my budget spreadsheet rigid. She told me I'd feel freer if I gave more away. Mateo's brow furrowed. She said that? She said financial attachment was a trauma response. Though I let out a bitter laugh that didn't feel like mine. She was softening the ground before she took the hit. For a moment, I didn't say anything else. I walked to the window, staring out at the neighborhood. Fences, mailboxes, motion lights. Everyone thinking they were safe inside 4 walls. I used to think that, too. Then I turned back. I need to know if she's done this before, I said. If she's used this software on anyone else. If she's moved money under anyone else's name. I had. Mateo nodded slowly. That's a tall order. I didn't flinch. Then I'll climb it. I picked up my phone and opened the voice recorder. I began logging everything: dates, email timestamps, IP addresses, folder names, file paths. I narrated like I was building a case for someone who didn't know me, who didn't trust easily. Because I didn't trust easily anymore either. And somewhere in that process, I stopped being scared. I felt it shift. Not loudly. Not all at once. But it was there. A weight moved. Like anger found its shape. Like grief found its spine. I looked at the final line of the printout. A reference number tied to a holding account in Delaware. No name. No title. Just numbers. But I knew who it belonged to. The number I never gave her was now the number that gave her away. I didn't knock like I usually do. I just rang the bell and stepped back, watching the camera above her porch flick on like a blinking eye. 2 seconds. Then 4. The door opened with a cheerful creak. And there she was, barefoot, holding a green smoothie, dressed like a walking Pinterest board, linen pants, glossy hair twisted into a loose bun. She smiled like nothing had happened. Savannah, you didn't tell me you were in town. I stared at her. She moved to hug me. I didn't. Her arms froze midair, then folded themselves back around the cup like that had been the plan all along. I need to talk to you, I said. Her smile dimmed, just enough to reveal the teeth behind it. Of course, she said sweetly, stepping aside. Come in. The house smelled like lavender oil and lemon cleaner. Light jazz played from somewhere in the kitchen. I followed her inside, each footstep feeling louder than it should. This was the same house where she'd hosted family brunches and yoga circles. The same house where she'd pulled my dad into vision board Sundays and convinced him not to press charges when Colby crashed his 3rd car. Now it felt sterile. Prepped. Like a stage. She gestured to the couch. Want some tea? Number, She nodded, settling across from me like we were about to talk about wallpaper. I took a breath. There was a wire transfer from my account last week, I said. $5 million. Gone in a single night. Her eyes didn't even flicker. That's terrible, she said. You should contact the bank right away. I did. I watched her closely. And I traced the login, the routing, the device. Her smile stretched almost like she'd rehearsed this part. Savannah, are you accusing me of something? You installed spyware on my laptop 2 months ago. Now, her expression cracked. Only for a second. Then the practiced innocence slid back into place. That's ridiculous. You said you ran an optimization tool. That was surveillance software. She shook her head, but her voice stayed soft. I was trying to help. Your system was overloaded. I just did what I do for my coaching clients. You're always so tightly wound. I thought I'd make things easier. By recording my screen? I didn't record anything. By logging into my bank account? I don't even know your passwords. You didn't need them. I pulled a folder from my bag, thin, but deliberate. She glanced at it like it might bite. Inside were 2 pages, the installation timestamp and the outbound IP linked to her old business address. I didn't give her the originals. Just the copies. She took the folder and flipped through it slowly, then set it down with a careful smile. Savannah, sweetheart. You've always been so paranoid, so afraid of letting go. He blinked. She said it like she was complimenting me. This isn't about letting go, I said. This is about theft. This is about you watching me, for months, maybe longer. Reading my emails, tracking my plans. Her voice dropped to a whisper, just loud enough to cut. I was trying to protect you. From what? From making a mistake. Her tone stayed syrupy. Weaponized calm. You were about to tie up your future in some house that would have drained you. I saw the numbers. You were overcommitting. I froze. There it was. She'd seen the budget. I hadn't said that part out loud yet. And she knew it. Her hand lifted slightly, gesturing to the space between us like it was fragile. You don't have to prove anything to me, Savannah. I know you've worked hard. I know you've been holding everything on your own. But $5 million just sitting there? That's not healthy. That's fear. That's scarcity mindset. I stared at her, and for a moment, I couldn't even find words. Then they came. You didn't protect me. I stood up slowly. You robbed me. You violated me. And you justified it with a TED Talk. Her face flickered. I walked toward the door. She followed, but not too close. Savannah. She called, voice high and thin. This doesn't have to be ugly. We're family. I turned back. No, I said quietly. You're the woman who married my father. That's not the same thing. For a second, something behind her eyes shifted. Anger? Panic? I wasn't sure. But it didn't matter. Because now I was sure. There was no gray left in this. I opened the door, stepped out into the bright Tennessee sunlight, and let it close behind me. I didn't slam it. I didn't have to. The sound of it clicking shut was loud enough. The first thing I did when I got home was lock the briefcase. It was stupid, maybe. Symbolic. But still, I did it. Snapped the latches, spun the dial, slid it back under my bed like I used to when I still lived with my dad. Back when saving $30 a week felt like winning. Now it just felt like protecting what little I had left. I hadn't even taken off my shoes yet when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. No voicemail. The second call came 10 minutes later. Then a text. You're being dramatic. This can be fixed. Please don't make this public. No name. But I didn't need one. I silenced the phone. Didn't block her. Not yet. Instead, I pulled out a manila folder and started sorting everything I had. Screen recordings, the spyware log, access times, the printout of that wire transfer, and the photograph of my mom and me on the porch swing. That last one wasn't part of the case. But I needed it anyway. I added a new sheet on top. Labeled it. Exhibit A. I didn't sleep again that night. The next morning, I called Patrice Holloway. She picked up halfway through the first ring. "Savannah Maddox," she said, same voice I remembered from my bank teller days. Crisp. Warm. Like gospel and gravel. "Miss Holloway, don't even start. You sound like your chest's been full of glass." I exhaled hard. Maybe I'd been holding my breath since Denise opened that door. "Can I run something by you?" I asked. "Come by the college," she said. "My office hours end at noon, bring whatever you've got." I drove across town with the folder riding shotgun. Patrice had downsized since retirement, just taught 2 classes a week now, but her office still smelled like fresh paper and peppermint tea. She didn't waste time. I laid everything out on her desk, talking faster than I meant to, dumping 8 years of hurt and the last 3 weeks of horror in one breathless download. When I finished, she didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, then picked up the Spyware log and nodded slowly. "Good girl," she said. "Not smart girl. Not wow, you're tough. Just good." Like someone who saw the cost of keeping quiet and chose not to. "You need a paper trail," she said. "Hard copies, notarized where you can. If this goes legal, emotions won't win it. Documentation will." I nodded. She leaned forward. "But this won't stay clean. Family never does." "Ah." A beat passed. "You ready for that?" He hesitated. Because the truth is, I wasn't. Not really. But I was more afraid of staying silent. "I am," I said. "Good," she said again. "Now let's make sure they can't twist this." We worked through my lunch break. By the time I left her office, I had a checklist. 3 affidavits, 1 request for data logs from the bank, 2 contacts for attorneys who specialized in financial abuse. I sat in the parking lot afterward and let the silence wrap around me like a weighted blanket. Then the phone buzzed again. Colby. My stepbrother. I hadn't heard from him in a year. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. The next notification came an hour later. Facebook. Denise had posted a video, her on a porch swing that looked eerily like the one she tore down years ago. The caption read, "Sometimes people project their fears onto the ones trying to help them. Forgive them anyway, that's what real family does." The comments were full of hearts and fake deep praise. I closed the app and opened my camera instead. Snapped a photo of the growing stack of evidence on my dining table. Labeled it, "June folder, legal draft." It wasn't for social media. It was for me. To remember that I wasn't imagining this. That what happened mattered. That I was still real, even when gaslighted into feeling invisible. Later that evening, Mateo stopped by with Thai food and 2 bottles of electrolyte water. "You're flushed," he said, brushing a hand against my cheek. "Have you eaten today?" I hadn't. But I nodded anyway. He didn't push it. Just sat beside me while I emailed 2 lawyers from Patrice's list. One replied within the hour. The other one? Her out of office said she was taking a personal leave after helping a woman win restitution in a coercive control case against her own father. I saved that message. Read it 3 times. Because it reminded me of something I kept trying to forget. Denise wasn't the only one who'd hurt me. My father had seen this coming. Maybe not the software, but the entitlement? The manipulation? He saw it. And he let it grow in his house. I don't think I ever fully forgave him for that. And now, he was gone. No apology, no explanation. Just this mess, and his last name stamped on everything. I reached for the photo again. Me, age 6. Holding a popsicle in one hand and my mother's thumb in the other. Before Denise. Before strategy replaced love. Before money became the currency of closeness. I slipped the photo into the Exhibit A folder. Not because I needed it for court, but because I needed a reason to keep going. And that little girl in the picture? She deserved better. I always thought the hardest part would be confronting her. But it wasn't. It was what came next. It was the silence. The long, echoing space where people used to call, used to check in, used to ask how I was. Now? I got vague texts. A few likes on old posts, nothing direct, nothing real. Until the group message lit up. It was titled, Maddox Cousins, Christmas Plans. I hadn't opened it in a year. But now, there it was at the top of my phone like a warning shot. Colby had posted a meme. One of those pastel ones with script font and passive aggression dressed up as inspiration. Family is who shows up, not who sues. 3 laughing emojis. I stared at it for a full minute, heart pounding harder than I wanted to admit. I didn't reply. Didn't even leave the group. Just muted it and kept moving. The next blow came from someone I didn't expect, Aunt Lorna. My mom's sister, one of the few people I thought would understand. She called while I was driving home from work, voice syrupy and slow. Sweetheart, I just heard some upsetting things, and I wanted to ask before I believe anything. My throat tightened. What things? Well, that you're going after Denise. That you're trying to take legal action over some misunderstanding. That you're dragging the family into it. It wasn't a misunderstanding. She sighed like I'd just confessed to ruining her dinner. Savannah, your stepmother's not perfect, but she's done a lot for this family. I mean, after your father died, she stepped in. She made sure Colby had structure. She stole $5 million from me, I said flatly. The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. Then came her voice, brittle and wounded. Maybe she just thought you'd share. I pulled over. I couldn't see the road through the white-hot blur behind my eyes. I've worked since I was 16, I said. I saved every bonus, every penny. I lived small so I could build big. And you think that makes me selfish? Sweetheart, she whispered, we're just worried about how this will look. There it was. The truth behind the truth. Not who was hurt, just how it might appear. I ended the call gently. Didn't yell, didn't explain. Just let her words settle where they belonged outside my ribcage. Later that night, I scrolled through Facebook again. Denise had updated her cover photo. A quote in bold script. Sometimes people attack what they can't control, love them anyway. Hundreds of comments. Half of them from people I hadn't seen since high school. The other half? Church friends. Wellness clients, family. They called her brave. Strong. Misunderstood. They called me nothing. And that, somehow, hurt worse. I shut my laptop. Let the room stay quiet. And for a while, I didn't move. I just sat there, in the low light of my kitchen, watching the ice melt in my glass. Then, my phone lit up. A message from Morgan. My cousin on Dad's side. Never loud, never dramatic. We hadn't spoken in over a year. I don't want to say this publicly, but I believe you. She's done things, said things. I just didn't know how far it went. I stared at the screen, my heart cracking open in some small, unexpected way. Just one person. But it mattered. I typed back. Thank you. That means more than you know. Because the truth was I didn't need a chorus. Just one honest voice in a room full of echoes. After that, I pulled out the file again. The one marked legal. Scrolled through the evidence. Timeline. Screenshots. Text logs. And the photograph of me and my mom. That photo had stayed with me through college moves, job interviews, breakups, promotions. Tucked into folders. Hidden in desk drawers. But now? Now I kept it on top. Because it reminded me of who taught me silence wasn't the same as peace. And love? Love didn't come with conditions. The next morning, I got another call. Blocked number. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. I already knew what it would be. Guilt dressed up as concern. Pressure painted as tradition. Another person trying to pull me back into a story where I played the villain for wanting what was mine. But that story? It was broken. And I wasn't shrinking myself to fit it anymore. The envelope was thick. Cream-colored. Embossed return address. No stamp hand-delivered by courier. I found it sitting on my front step just after 9, tucked under the edge of the welcome mat like some polite threat. At first, I thought it was another letter from the bank. But when I saw the name at the top Arnett and Low, LLP, my stomach dropped. I carried it inside with 2 fingers, like it might burn me. Didn't open it right away. Just stared at it while the coffee brewed, heart pounding a little too hard for a Tuesday morning. Mateo was already at work. Patrice was teaching. So, I was alone. I finally slit the edge open with the corner of my old debit card and slid the papers out. The first sentence hit me in the teeth. Our client, Mrs. Denise Arnett Maddox, asserts that the transfer of funds was executed with implied consent and informal verbal agreement. Implied consent. Informal verbal agreement. Like I just casually offered her $5 million during a grocery run. I kept reading. Apparently, I had agreed to support a shared family investment opportunity and requested administrative assistance from Mrs. Maddox on several digital processes related to financial planning. It was filled with language I'd seen before, twisted legal framing that tried to make theft sound collaborative. But the part that made me sit down? The line that said she was willing to resolve the matter privately. If Miss Maddox ceases all legal pursuit, agrees to non-disclosure, and refrains from defamatory statements or further digital harassment. Digital harassment. Because I posted a fraud alert after my account was drained. Because I reported spyware that traced back to her. She was flipping the script. Trying to turn my survival into slander. And offering me an out. A clean, quiet way to disappear. The settlement was simple. She'd return a portion of the money, maybe 40%, and we'd all move forward. It would never go to court. No press. No discovery. No headlines. Just a hush. And a check. I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers. Then I reached for the file on my kitchen table exhibit and pulled out the photograph. The same one I'd kept close this whole time. Me and Mom, on the porch swing. My hand in hers. A popsicle in the other. Back before love had conditions. Back before family meant signing things in silence to keep the peace. A wave of anger came next, thought and sudden. Not just at Denise. At my father. At every person who saw pieces of her manipulation and called it charm. At the relatives who told me to let it go because Denise had been through a lot. At the quiet ones. The bystanders. The fence-sitters. I could have taken the money. Could have gone back to my job, kept my head down, and pretended none of this ever happened. But something inside me knew if I signed that settlement, I'd lose more than I'd ever recover. Not just the rest of the money. But my voice. My name. My right to say, this happened and it was wrong. I texted Mateo. Got a letter. She's offering to settle. Wants me silent. He replied 3 minutes later. She's afraid. That's what silence means. I'll bring dinner. I smiled a little. Then I picked up the phone and called the attorney Patrice had connected me with M's, Rhonda Castillo. Her assistant answered and put me through. Savannah Maddox, Rhonda said, her voice clear and clipped. I read the file. You have a case. But it won't be pretty. I already knew that. She continued. They'll dig, they'll gaslight. They'll try to make you the unstable one. And they'll throw money at you to walk away. I got their offer this morning, I said. And? I looked at the settlement again, so pristine, so simple. A peace treaty signed in cowardice. I'm not taking it, I said. There was a pause. Then, good. She didn't say brave. She didn't say right. Just good. And it landed the way Patrice's voice had. Solid. Unshakable. That night, I filed the countersuit. Didn't post about it, didn't text the group chat, didn't call the cousins. I just stood in my kitchen, holding that empty envelope, and dropped it straight into the trash. No ceremony. No drama. Just one more thing Denise wouldn't get to keep. The courtroom looked smaller than I expected. Muted beige walls. Thin carpeting. That cold hum of government air conditioning. I sat on the left side behind my attorney, palms flat on the table. I hadn't worn anything flashy, just a navy dress and a blazer that still smelled like dry cleaning fluid. Across from me, Denise sat flanked by 2 attorneys. One of them whispered something in her ear. She laughed soft and rehearsed. She looked radiant, honestly. Like she was headed to a panel on women in leadership, not a civil suit for financial fraud. When the judge walked in, everyone stood. And I swear, for a second, I heard my mother's voice. Shoulders back, sweetheart. Chin level, no shaking. I didn't know if she would have survived this moment. But I was here because she didn't. We got through the preliminaries. Motions. Deadlines. The judge's tone was all business. He looked over his glasses like a disappointed uncle and moved the docket like he was flipping through coupons. Then they called Denise to the stand. She walked up slowly, like it hurt. Raised her right hand with a sigh that made the jury look up. Swore in. And smiled. Her voice was syrupy. Warm. She started by talking about my father. His big heart. The stress he carried before he passed. How she'd stepped in to help because I was still grieving and afraid of risk. Oh, I stared at her. Not because I was shocked, but because it felt like watching someone narrate your life with a pen dipped in poison. She said I'd asked for guidance. That I'd been indecisive. That she'd only stepped in to keep me from making a terrible mistake. And then came the dagger. She told me she didn't trust herself with that much money. I thought helping her was love. I saw one juror shift uncomfortably. My attorney leaned toward me and whispered, "Let her keep going." Because lies overplayed themselves. Sure enough, when the cross-examination began, Denise tripped. She couldn't explain the spyware logs. Said she didn't know much about computers. Then mentioned she once cleaned up my system using a tool her coaching clients swore by. But that tool didn't exist on any registry. And her company had no technical staff. Then came the screenshots. The metadata. The timestamps. By the time she stepped down, I saw the cracks forming. Still she smiled at the jury. Like she was thanking them for coming to brunch. Then it was my turn. I stood up. Walked slowly to the front of the room, careful not to rush. They swore me in. I sat. Took a breath. And told the truth. I told them about the savings. How I built it quietly, obsessively, over 15 years. How my mother taught me to keep track of every dime. How Patrice mentored me when I didn't even know what a rollover IRA was. I told them I never shared the password. Never gave consent. Never signed anything. That I woke up one morning and found my entire financial future gone. That the woman who smiled across the courtroom from me had watched me build it, brick by brick, and then took it. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't afford it. Not here. Not now. Then something happened I didn't expect. Colby was called to the stand. He shuffled up like a teenager caught skipping school even though he was 33. He looked nervous. Real nervous. They asked him about the family first investment Denise had referenced in the fake proposal. He looked at her. She smiled, nodding like a mother at a spelling bee. Then he said, "Yeah. She told me she was helping Savannah buy a property, but when I asked her if I could get in on it, she said she was already managing Savannah's money. Said she was going to move some things around and I should keep quiet until it was settled." The courtroom fell silent. Even the judge looked up. Denise's jaw clenched, but only for a second. Then the lawyers moved on. But I saw it. The shift. The flicker. The part where the mask cracked. I returned to my seat. Mateo was there, one row behind, nodding softly. Patrice sat beside him, hands clasped in her lap like she was holding the weight of my whole childhood. When we broke for the day, I didn't speak to anyone. Just stepped outside into the parking lot, where the sun felt too bright for what I'd just said out loud. But I wasn't shaking. And that surprised me. I sat in my car for a few minutes, hands still on the steering wheel, listening to the low hum of the engine. Then I opened my bag. Pulled out the photograph of me and my mom. Held it for just a second. I didn't need her to speak. Because today, I'd said enough. The envelope came while I was still brushing my teeth. This time, it was email-less, dramatic, more modern. Subject line, updated proposal, confidential settlement, Urgent review requested. I stared at it through the foam in my mouth, spit, and walked away without opening it. 15 minutes later, I sat on the couch, hair still damp, wrapped in Mateo's old hoodie, scrolling through it line by line. The offer was bigger now. 70% of the money. No admission of guilt. No public statements. In exchange, I'd withdraw my suit, sign an airtight NDA, and agree never to speak of the incident again, not in media, not in writing, not even in therapy unless bound by privilege. And this part. A formal joint statement may be issued indicating that the matter was resolved amicably with mutual understanding. Mutual understanding. My stomach turned. I scrolled down again, slower this time. There was even a suggestion carefully worded, of course, that Denise was open to issuing a public apology for the misunderstanding, should I desire one. A misunderstanding. $5 million. Screenshots. Spyware. A family torn to pieces. And she was offering me an apology press release? I set the laptop down gently and stared at the ceiling. A part of me was tempted. Honestly. Because I was tired. So tired. Every night I double-checked locks, phone settings, emails. I kept backup drives under my bed. I slept light, woke early, answered questions with a lawyer in the room. And maybe that was what she counted on. Not just my fear but my fatigue. I closed my eyes and imagined what life could look like if I signed. No court. No headlines. Just money. Enough to rebuild. Enough to disappear if I wanted. And silence. That awful, tempting kind of silence that people call peace. I stood, pacing the room, trying to shake it off. But the doubt stuck. Who was I trying to protect at this point? My mom was gone. My dad was never on my side, the cousins had picked theirs. What was I holding on to? The fight? The principle? What if the only person still watching was me? I reached for my phone and texted Patrice. They made another offer. Bigger. All but full. A few minutes later, she called. Didn't even say hello. Savannah, she said. What's the number that matters most right now? He blinked. What? What's the number? The one that lives in your gut. The one they can't print on a check. I didn't answer. Because I knew what she meant. And I knew I didn't want to say it out loud. So she did. You already paid for this once. Don't do it twice. Tears stung behind my eyes, fast and unexpected. Thank you, I said, voice small. We hung up. The silence settled again. That's when I walked to the drawer. The one I hadn't opened in weeks. I reached past old pens, receipts, paper clips until I found it. The folded photograph. Edges soft from years of handling. Me and Mom. Porch swing. Her hand on my shoulder, that sunglow in her smile. The day before her biopsy came back. I don't remember much about that week. But I remember this. She never told me to be nice. She told me to be clear. I held the photo to my chest. And for the first time since this all began, I said it out loud in an empty room. I'm not signing anything. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. But it felt final. Like a page turning. That night, Mateo brought home Indian takeout and a bottle of wine that neither of us opened. I told him about the offer, the apology draft, the PR angle. He didn't say much. Just reached across the table and covered my hand with his. You already did the hard part, he said. And what's that? Not disappearing. I smiled. Not big. But real. I got the call just before lunch. No court this time. No audience. Just a voicemail from Rhonda, my attorney. Hey Savannah. Call me back when you can. The ruling's in. I stared at the phone for a long second. Not because I was scared. But because. Once you get the answer, you can't unknow it. I called her back with my hands shaking. Rhonda's voice was steady. Professional. You won, she said. All counts. I didn't say anything. She continued. Full restitution. Court-ordered wire transfer within 10 business days. Plus, fees. Still, I stayed quiet. "Savannah?" she asked. "I'm here." And I was. But part of me was somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere far from the noise of justice and headlines and bank balances. "I'll send you the paperwork to sign," she added gently. "And congratulations." We hung up. I didn't jump up. Didn't scream. Didn't pour champagne or call the group chat I'd long since left. I just sat there at my kitchen table, watching the way the sunlight landed across the wood grain. It was over. And I didn't feel powerful. I felt hollow. Soft. Like a worn-out rope that had finally stopped pulling. My phone buzzed again. "Matteo." "Whoa?" I sent back. "It's done. I won." He wrote back. "Home in 10. I tucked the phone aside and reached for the folder. The same one I'd carried like armor for weeks. Exhibit A. Inside were the screenshots, logs, transcripts. And the photo. Always the photo. Me and Mom. Porch swing. That summer heat humming behind us like a lullaby. I took it out. Held it a little longer than usual. And then, without thinking, I stood, walked to the kitchen sink, and ran the water gently over one corner. Just enough to blur the ink along the edges. Nothing dramatic, just letting it soften. I wasn't erasing her. I was letting go of the grip. When Matteo walked in, I didn't look up right away. He came behind me, wrapped his arms around my shoulders, and rested his chin on the top of my head. "I'm proud of you," he said into my hair. "I don't feel proud." He didn't try to argue. We stood there for a long time. Eventually, we sat on the porch. The new swing Matteo helped me install last month creaked gently beneath us. It wasn't the same as the old one. But that was the point. I leaned back, letting the slats press into my shoulder blades, and watched the leaves stir in the yard. It was just past spring. Everything looked tired and alive at once. "I think I need a break," I said quietly. Matteo nodded. "From what?" "From all of it. From fixing everything. From pretending I'm not tired." He reached for my hand. "Then rest." I closed my eyes. The case was closed. The money would come back. But my family? That wasn't coming with it. No group text would get revived. No cousins would apologize. No Sunday dinners were waiting to be restarted. But maybe that was okay. Maybe peace wasn't something you won. Maybe it was just what happened when you stopped begging for something that couldn't be given. The screen door behind us creaked. I looked back into the house. For the first time in weeks, it didn't feel haunted. Just quiet. And that quiet? That felt like victory. A month after the verdict, I closed my first new account. Not at the same bank. Somewhere smaller. Local. Quiet. The manager asked if I wanted to add anyone else to it. "No," I said, with a smile I didn't have to fake. "Just me." She handed me the papers, and I signed. Name. Date. Beneficiary. All mine. It felt ordinary. And that after everything was the gift. I drove home with the windows down, the spring breeze cutting through the Tennessee humidity. No more subpoenas. No more strategy calls. No more looking over my shoulder wondering who was pretending to believe me. Now I was just Savannah. No hashtags. No case number. No storyline. Just a woman who'd been through something sharp and quiet and scarring and came out cleaner on the other side. When I got home, I walked past the kitchen table without stopping. The folder was still there. Still marked Exhibit A, though I no longer needed it. I opened it once more. Not to relive it, but to release it. Inside was the photo, now dried and a little warped from the water I'd let run across it weeks ago. I looked at my mother's smile. That porch swing. That little sun-hardened girl with popsicle lips and a paper heart. Then I slid the photo out, set it aside, and closed the folder for good. I didn't burn it. Didn't shred it. I just tucked it into a box in the hall closet, behind some holiday decorations and a blanket I never used. Not forgotten. Just done. That night, I made dinner barefoot. No court dates to plan around. No legal documents on the counter. Just pasta. Garlic. A little wine. Mateo's voice humming something low from the porch. The new swing creaked in rhythm. When we sat down to eat, he asked how the bank visit went. Smooth, I said. Unremarkable. He raised his glass. Too unremarkable. We clinked gently. After dinner, I stayed outside while he cleaned up. The sun dipped behind the trees. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass. I didn't reach for my phone. Didn't scroll. Didn't post anything about healing or justice or closure. Because some things don't belong online. Some things are earned quietly. I thought about Denise for the first time in days. Not with rage. Not with hurt. Just distance. I didn't know what she was doing now, or what she told people. But I didn't care. Because she wasn't the story anymore. I was. And I wasn't a cautionary tale. I was a beginning. Later, I slipped the photo into a new frame. One I picked up at a thrift store for $3. It wasn't fancy, just wooden. Worn at the corners. I placed it on the shelf by the window. It didn't need to face the room anymore. It faced the light. And for once, so did I.